Well, welcome to the Impactus podcast. I'm Dean Brenton, and we are here to equip you as men for a life of purpose and godly impact. I am so delighted today to be sharing this podcast with a good friend of this ministry, a new friend of mine, Dr. Michael Bayer. Mike has been a family physician in Cobourg since 1997. Prior to Cobourg, he spent 7 years in Moose Factory on James Bay in Northern Ontario, where he practiced family medicine and taught medical students and residents. And he continues to be passionate about teaching both in medical and the Christian context. He's married to Judy, who is also a family physician. They have 4 grown sons, 1 grandchild, and 1 on the way. Congratulations. Mike and Judy live in Cobourg, attend Cobourg Alliance Church, where he has led a Saturday morning men's Bible study group for about 20 years. And in 2011, Mike and a group of others began Northumberland Promise, a grassroots outreach for families in a community house in the Cobourg area. And we're going to hear some about that. That's going to be an exciting part of this conversation today. So thank you, Dr. Bayer, for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's great. And you and I have had a chance to have some conversations in the past, and we wanted to pull this conversation into our much wider Impactus audience because you have a great story to tell. So let's start with your story, your backstory, a bit of your faith journey, and who is Dr. Michael Bayer?
All right. Well, although I was born in Toronto, I grew up in Connecticut in the U.S., and I was part of a church-going family. My mom was very devout, my dad not so much, and I attended church every Sunday. And it was actually around 3rd grade that I remember really wanting to go into medicine. And I struggled a bit with self-esteem growing up, and I felt that medicine would give me some respect, that people would respect me, and also that I really did feel that sense of wanting to help people. And so I did fairly well in school with my grades and such. And so ended up going to university in Boston. And there things were going along very well. I felt I was trusting God, and he seemed to be with me as I was having these successes. But then in 2nd year, I hit a major roadblock. And it's a course called organic chemistry. And for anybody who's ever taken organic chemistry, you might know that it's a fairly challenging course. The other thing that's important about it is it's really kind of a litmus test if you're a pre-med person. And so you have to do really well on it. And really, with medicine being so competitive, I mean, the word on the street is you got to ace the course. You got to get at least 90% on it to have really a chance of getting into medicine. And so I knew this was my real crux course. Well, I took the midterm of that course, and even though I thought I worked hard, lo and behold, I got a 62 on the course, on the midterm. Now, the way the course was being graded, I get 1 mark for my midterm and a double mark for the final. And it's not hard to figure out that with a 62, even if I got 100% on the final, I didn't have the points I needed to get the 90% that I felt I needed. And so literally my life was flashing before my eyes. I questioned, God, where are you? You know, I've been working hard. I thought you were with me. I began to wonder, what good is my faith? Because it's not taking me through these difficult times. And so it led to a real crisis. And it was right around that time on my university campus that a fellow named Josh McDowell came to our campus. And at that time, he was a very popular campus speaker. He had written some books, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and things like that, More Than a Carpenter. And he came and spoke on the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And I was fascinated by that talk because my previous thoughts about Christianity was that it was more like a philosophy or a kind of a make work project on your life, you know, to make you a better person. And the fact of how he taught that there was historical evidence and that Jesus' life, his death, his resurrection were all historical facts. And that if Jesus was alive today, then that has impact on me today as well in the 21st century. And so I wanted to learn more. Some guys came by my dorm and they shared Christ with me and how I could have a personal relationship with him. And even though I had practiced religion, that idea of a personal relationship was new. And I invited Jesus into my life. At that point, not much changed. I didn't really grasp it, I think, initially. But 2 months later, I went to a student conference. And it was at that conference that I was challenged with the notion that your faith has to be more than just Sunday mornings, basically, that it has to impact every area of your life. And it's a real following of Christ, totally wholeheartedly giving him everything. And I wrestled with that because, I like being in control. I was willing to give God Sundays, but I don't know about every day and every minute of every day. But finally, I bowed my knee to him and I just said, Lord, you are my Lord. I'll do whatever you want. And this was important because I was still in anguish over my organic chemistry mark and didn't know what was going to happen with my career in medicine. And when it really boiled down to it, if God loved me so much that he sent his son to die for me, he's going to take care of me. And even if that doesn't mean that I'll get into medicine. And so I just trusted him, but I just had the sense that I should keep pressing on. I went into the final of the organic chemistry course. I thought very well prepared, but in that intervening time, I also changed my attitude. Medicine was no longer my primary thing. It was pleasing God, serving God. And so I began to do a lot of other things. Part of the group I was in, we shared our faith regularly, and so I went out and did that, and I was part of Bible studies and learning God's word. And I just noticed I was really hungry to learn God's word. I loved it. I wanted to obey God. That's when I knew something was either wrong with me or I'd had become a Christian, because I suddenly was wanting to read the Bible, which before I had no interest to do. And wanting to obey it. And so a verse that was really important for me at that time was Matthew 6:33, where Jesus said, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And so the added on things was going to be my pre-med. And so I went into my organic chemistry final, realizing I mathematically was eliminated, basically, but I would go and do it. And when I looked at the exam, to my surprise, there was a 10-point extra credit question. It's the first time and only time that's ever happened in my university career. So I still needed a lot of marks. So I worked through the exam and I was amazed at how I seemed to know all the answers. It just came really easily to me going down through that exam. I finished the exam with some extra time, so I tackled this extra point question, and it was a very complex organic molecule. It looked a little bit like the Starship Enterprise, to be honest. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I build this based on the building blocks that they'd given in the question. And I struggled, and I started to put it together, but then I couldn't figure out how the whole thing went together. And then literally, as he's saying, put down your pencils, I had figured out that I had to build two halves and then put the two halves together, and finished it. And I thought I got it. So finished it feeling very good about the exam and really sensing that God gave me something supernatural there in that exam. And so it turned out that on the exam itself, I got 98%, which was, I think, probably the highest mark I got of any course exam. And then I got the 10-point extra credit. So I got 108 on this organic chemistry exam. And this was a tough prof. This prof was known to be the tougher of the two organic chemistry profs. So actually, doing the math, 2 times 108 plus 62, I was well over the 270 that I needed to, and I actually ended up with a 93 average and aced it comfortably. And so from there, I just realized God's going to take care of me, and it kind of propelled me through the rest of my time. I had other episodes like that, a course called biochemistry, a tough course. I studied the least of my cohort, and I got the highest mark among them. Again, just putting God ahead. Now, I'm not advocating don't study for sure, but realizing that, if we keep it in perspective, that God's ultimately in control, he'll take care of those things. And so from there, I applied to medicine. I had a very strong resume. And then I got hit with a really amazing sort of another jolt. I wasn't accepted into medicine my first time out. And I had actually published a paper. I thought, a very much better resume than my roommate, who ended up being accepted to medical school. And so I really began to wonder, Lord, why did you give me such a good mark in organic chemistry to, keep me from moving on? And again, it was a crisis moment, but a moment where I realized ultimately, if God didn't want me to go into medicine, then that was an acceptable thing, that he would take care of me. And ultimately his best was what I needed. And so that time I was a little bit cocky. I only applied to 4 medical schools at that time, which is considered not very many in the US. But again, I thought if God wanted me there, I would be there. And I didn't get accepted to any. And so the following year, I applied again. I worked, lived at home, and reapplied. And that time I said, okay, the fleece is going to be a little different. I applied to 14 universities, but I only actually interviewed at 4 of them. I felt pretty confident that I was going to get in. And I got into 3 out of the 4. So it was like God had said, okay, this is your year kind of thing. And one of them was at McGill University, which was the best school that I had applied to. I had fully planned to come back to the States afterwards, and they had a good international reputation. So I would have had, I don't think, any trouble getting back in as I talked with residency and academic people in medicine in the States. And so then I came to Canada and studied at McGill, then eventually studied family medicine. I met my wife, Judy, who's also a family physician. And we had our first child in medical school, which was another interesting story. That was a good challenge. And then from there, spent 7 years in Moose Factory, just with a wonderful time with the church there, brothers and sisters in Christ, Indigenous folk, and they're still good friends. And then after the 7 years, came to Coburg. So that's where we are up to now, I guess. So.
What a fascinating journey, from organic chem to that's incredible. And also just to, it's such a good lesson that as you learn to put God first and trust him, he began to order things in your life and direct your steps. Like, that's such a good spiritual lesson for all of us. So I'm going to ask you the obvious question. So we're in the midst of a global pandemic, and I have some friends who are in the medical field, and I know your profession is challenging at best at any given day. How have you handled your practice, and how's the pandemic affected you? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think, again, recognizing that there are no surprises in God's world, that he knew it was going to happen. And this is really a remarkable pandemic in the sense that I think the world will change coming out of this. We will be different. And so it's really just that idea of saying, okay, Lord, what do you want to teach me through this? What do you want to do? And thankfully, both my wife and I can be introverts if we have to be. And so we hunkered down at home. Thankfully, we had our backyard fixed up just before the pandemic. And so we have a nice little space that we can hang out in. Medicine is very different. There were a few really kind of, moments where it really brought me to pause and to really think, what is going to happen here? So, I mean, the day to day, we're doing a lot online. Seeing a lot of people by phone or with video and that kind of thing. A lot of protective stuff, protecting our staff at the office, visors, masks, cutting back our staff. We had to think about, what if one person became positive, right? Then suddenly everyone else is going to have to quarantine, and the office is closed, and we have a tight space, and, thinking about all those things, not bringing so many people in because you don't want people crowded in your waiting room, waiting to be seen. So you had to time everything really quite a bit closer. So it was a challenge that way. And the one thing that I think was interesting and really a little bit troubling, and especially in light of what's going on in Alberta, is I was invited to be part of a committee that had to look at, what if we needed to ration our resources? In other words, what if our ICU was overwhelmed, and on a given day, we had 4 ventilators and we had 6 patients who needed to be on the ventilator? What are we going to do? And thankfully in Ontario there was a contingency where you could send people fairly easily through our medical transport to another hospital. But if the entire system was overwhelmed, we would be looking at rationing. And that's why I think medical professionals are so much more adamant about getting vaccinated, because we know that vaccines are going to keep people out of the ICU. And also we feel for our colleagues, like the ICU physicians, nurses, the emergency nurses and physicians. It creates incredible stress when not only they're overburdened with a high workload, but also when they have to make decisions about, compromising care. We've never had to do that in Ontario. In Canada, I don't think ever, where we've had to compromise care based on limited resources. And that's what we were faced with. And but thankfully in Ontario, we've gotten past that. I worry in Alberta that they may still be faced with that in a few weeks. But it's been a challenge. For me personally, the other thing that's been tough, I had our first grandchild born in June of 2020. We never saw him in person until August this year. So he was 14 months, and it was just a joy. We actually got turned away at the border because although I'm a U.S. citizen, Judy, my wife, is not, and traveling on land, they said, "Don't you know there's a pandemic?" So they turned us away, even though we were pristine. We had no COVID for sure. We didn't, but they wouldn't let us into their COVID infested country. Anyway, that's a little mean. I'm sorry, any Americans who might have heard this, but I'm speaking as an American too. And I have a brother and a mother in Florida, and I'm very, very frustrated at sometimes how things have been managed there. But anyway, but it worked out much better because my son and his wife and my grandson were able to come home to Coburg, or I should say come to Coburg, and everyone else was able to come. I have a son in Iceland who came to visit, and so we had everyone together, and it actually worked out for the best. Another good example of where we got thwarted on one level, and then it opened up a great opportunity afterwards. So
that's the reality of where we find ourselves, both in the challenges personally of distance and family and connection, and yet when I hear you say that, wow, that's those decisions around critical care and prioritizing. I mean, that's things get real really fast when you're having those conversations. So we can only imagine the stress and the burden that many healthcare workers have been carrying. So I want to say thank you for what you do, because in a global pandemic, we need you and we appreciate you so much. So I do want to jump to a kind of pivot, if I can use a pandemic word. But you're not only a doctor, but you've been really involved in your local church for a long time as well, especially in ministry to men. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as I was leaving university, those first few years of my Christian life, I became very interested, and I felt my gifting was in the area of teaching, and the importance of discipleship really, really became evident to me. And I saw it being very strategic to work with men. Number one, it's more natural for a man to work with men, I find. And also, men, they have very often they have families, they're at workplaces, They are in the community, sports, various different things. And so if men can be mature followers of Christ, that's going to have an impact in so many areas of society. And so I saw that as a very strategic kind of an area to get involved in. And so I began a men's Bible study. Again, it was about 20 years ago or so, a little more maybe. And it's just been very exciting, because not only is there a hunger, and we still are meeting, and there's incredible just passion and desire to study God's word, but also to serve in the community and live out their faith. And again, this is where my work in medicine has been so beautiful in juxtaposing that. I met a fella in the emergency. We found out we were both Christians. We began to meet together, pray together, and he had a burden for people with addictions. And so it eventually led to the start of a Celebrate Recovery group in Coburg. And then we had another fella who I admitted in emergency or in the hospital, an elderly man. His son came in toting a big Bible. And I said, well, he must be a Christian. So we began speaking, and then he shared with me his burden for seeing something change in our society, in our throughout Northumberland County. And I saw the same thing. I saw really Satan was winning in Northumberland County. We saw churches closing. We saw pastors leaving just under terrible circumstances. We saw division and acrimony within the churches. And we were really on our heels, and we began to really pray and cry out, God, would you change this? Would you bring revival here? Would you turn this around? And as we were praying together, we were kind of led to an area of town in Coburg, which is a community housing neighborhood. So it's a not-for-profit Coburg housing area. And it's where the toughest people, the toughest social situation is, where they talking to the police, where most of the calls were, a lot of domestic issues, domestic violence, a lot of drug use, a lot of incarceration. It's where our angel tree requests came, getting gifts for kids where parents have been incarcerated. And so we began first praying, and then, another beautiful thing that I found, God works right beyond our comfort zone. So we need to get out of our comfort zone if we want to really see God at work. And so we're praying in the nice, warm church building for a while. And then, it became clear, well, maybe we should get out. And so we began in March. It was cold and damp. And let's do a prayer walk. Let's actually go to that neighborhood. And we also just kind of confirmed, where would Jesus hang out if he were living in Coburg today? And then we felt it was probably in that neighborhood, that he would be. And so we thought, well, let's see what happens. So we did some prayer walks around the neighborhood. And one time we were praying and it was raining, and we had umbrellas, and, we're walking, and then the sun came out. And so as we just finished walking, a young woman comes out of her apartment, comes almost right up into our faces and says, "What are you guys doing?" And we were like, "Oh," she caught us totally by surprise. And so we said, "Well, we're just some people from some of the local churches, and we're just trying to see how we can help you, And she said, "I know how you can help." She said, "Our kids are getting cuts in the woods where they're playing right next to the units. There's broken glass, there's hypodermic needles, there's burned out mattresses, there's all kinds of junk in there. Some of the moms and I were going to do a cleanup of that area." And I said, "How about this? We'll partner with you. When the weather gets better, I'll get some help from the churches, and you guys get people from the community, and we'll work together and do the cleanup." Now, this was a very littered place, and there was a lot of dangerous stuff, just a lot of junk, old truck batteries, all kinds of things in these woods. So we talked to the housing guys, and they were so thrilled we were going to do this. They actually rented or let us have space in the dumpster. They bought garbage bags for us. And so we had 40 people from the churches, including some pastors, and 30 from the community. So 70 people worked together in May of that year. and cleaned up that neighborhood and cleaned out those woods and got old, baby buggies and, like I say, truck batteries and old sofas. And we filled up a very large dumpster, like a double size kind of a dumpster. And that kind of got the ball rolling. And then from there, we did. Someone had the idea of, let's just cook a free barbecue. There's a field nearby. Rent some jumping castles, and just on a Sunday afternoon, just word of mouth, invite people to come. And in talking to them, we some of the kids were interested in a VBS. And so there was one of the local Baptist churches was doing a VBS. We said, we'll rent a bus and take you guys there. And 20 kids from that neighborhood went to a VBS because of that, one child saying, sure, I'd love to go, and so from there, it just began to grow. We had a Christmas party where we bought gifts for kids, very high quality gifts, about $30 each. We had about 100 guests, cooked a turkey dinner for them. And, one of the things we just want to do is introduce people to who Jesus is. And so Christmas was a wonderful opportunity, because everyone thinks about Christmas, they think of Santa Claus, they think about just getting gifts. And so we had one of our youth pastors share a Christmas message. We sang some Christmas carols, and then from there, we just were again looking for things to do in the neighborhood. We had the local school there, which is a small school. It had a very, very tough track record in terms of the lowest performance for kids in terms of reading and math. And I sort of offered to the principal to help with, if there's anything we can do to help you. And, it was kind of one of those awkward conversations. Well, we're this faith-based group and we'd love to help, in any way we can. And of course, he's like, faith-based group in a church, in a school, and so I kind of thought, oh, well, that probably is all there is to it. But he actually called me a couple of weeks later and he said, we need some people to read. We're going to mimic kids reading at home, which we don't think they're getting. And so we got a couple of volunteer ladies to read for the kids, and they loved it. And they really thrived on that. And then one of the kids one day said to one of the ladies reading, he pulled out a handful of sugar cubes and he said, "This is my breakfast. Dad forgot to buy groceries this week." And then we realized that one of the problems with these kids and their academics was they had not, they were hungry, right? And so we thought, let's do something simple, a breakfast program type of thing, maybe a granola bar, an apple. And so as soon as people got the idea of helping these kids, the volunteers just poured in. And they gave us a room where we could set up a microwave, a fridge, and we started cooking eggs for them. We made toasted bagels and cheese and bacon, and we had cereal, and we set up tables and chairs, and the parents came and the kids came. And at one point we were feeding half the kids in the school with the breakfast program. And they loved us. After that, we were advertising for a summer camp, our own camp, and it was a Christian camp. And they said, "Oh, sure, you can give the flyers right in the kids in the classroom." Because once we developed their trust, it was an open door for opportunities. We did a Saturday program. They gave us the rental of the school once a month, and then we realized we need to connect with these kids more. And then we developed an after-school program, which was running once a week, and that's like a Sunday school for the unchurched, and it's just amazing. And I just have had moments where I've just been so excited. There's this beautiful video series that Phil Vischer did. It's called "What's in the Bible?" If you want to ever, have a compelling way of teaching kids about the Bible, that's a great one. And the one on the Gospels gives a beautiful presentation of Jesus and what he did on the cross, his substitution death for us on the cross. And, it was after that 3 of the kids there gave their lives to Christ. And we've had a whole bunch of kids who just expressed that interest to do that at the summer camps and such. And And we see Northumberland Promise as a bit of a pyramid. We have at the bottom the things that we do that don't have any spiritual input, that just is expressing love to the community. We've done dog vaccinations, for instance, no spiritual content there. At one of the dog vaccinations, the dad comes up and says, our kids want to come to Sunday school. Can you arrange it? Like, why? We're vaccinating your dog, but it's just that God works in those moments where we're obedient, where we're faithful. And so we, that's kind of the low of the pyramid. And then, we interject some spiritual things. Or the breakfast program would also be sort of on that base. And then things like the Christmas party, which is a fun time, but the kids hear the Christmas message. And then, working up, we have the after school program where the kids clearly hear about the gospel. And we've also done an alpha course. A couple of women have come to faith at that alpha course. And one of them is really growing. She's excited, devouring the Bible. We've now got a ladies' discipleship group going, a very gifted woman teacher who is leading these ladies, and it's again been a wonderful thing. Our summer camps, we partner with Athletes in Action and Northumberland Youth Unlimited, so Youth for Christ, to do a camp together. We do the sports side, they do the arts camp. And it's just, again, this summer with COVID and, all of the challenges, we had 60 kids in the sports camp and 20 kids in the arts camp. And again, about 20 to 30 kids who've expressed that they want to follow Jesus. And many of them from, an unchurched background. And so it's just been wonderful. At the summer camp this year, we had 6 little girls, 6 to 8 years old, who wanted a Bible. One asked, and then the other ones wanted one too. And so we had these children's Bibles, the hardcover, very nice children's Bibles. They were reading them voraciously. I talked to a little girl a couple of weeks after the camp, and I said, how's it going with your reading? She said, good, I'm on the last chapter. So she's been like, and one mom told me that her daughter never reads, but she's been reading this Bible like nobody's business. So we just see, that evidence of God at work. And it's so exciting. It builds my faith every time I see these things happening, that, God is at work. So it's a very exciting thing. And now God has opened, seemingly, I can't say yet, but there is an opportunity. I've got some initial green lights to do a community garden in that neighborhood. So the managers there say, yeah, make a proposal. So we're right in the process of putting in a proposal for a community garden. That's particularly exciting for us because we've been figuring out how to engage men. Like, we engage the kids, the women come, and we have a ladies' coffee group. And, the women have enjoyed connecting with us because they bring the kids to the activities. But the guys, they're kind of standing off a bit. And we were thinking about some things to do with guys when the pandemic hit and everything was kind of shut down. But now with this community garden, I'm hoping that will engage some of the guys. And we have just a wonderful relationship with one of the families there. The father of the house is an avid gardener. And so we're partnering with him on this. He's involved in the planning committee. And even though, he's not a person of faith, perhaps, but we're just going to come alongside of him and hopefully it will lead to that. And it was actually his daughter, who's one of the ones who wanted the Bible, who has been reading it voraciously. 2 of their children came to our camp. So it's a very exciting time that God has been working, and it's just been so wonderful to engage the community, the churches as well. One of the things I found, and one of the reasons why we really began, was that churches, we tend to be insular, right? We tend to go in and out of our churches without a lot of engagement in the community. This is a grassroots opportunity to engage in the community. It's like your mission field is right outside your door. And we've never really had trouble getting volunteers because of that. On some of our events, we have over 100 volunteers, and they just love that opportunity to serve. It's like people are looking for opportunities to serve. So that's been very exciting part of it too.
That is, what an incredible example of how God has led you and opened doors of opportunity that are significant to really transform a community. I love that. There's so many things in there I would love to unpack. It's just that's incredible. Like, what has it done for you personally? I can see the passion and the joy as you share those things, but what would you say is like your biggest takeaway from your involvement and learning and through the serving opportunities? What has been your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, I think, it's really built my faith. Someone once said, faith is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And that whole idea of going beyond your comfort zone. There's been many challenges and many times where I had no idea where God was going to take whatever was going on. There were times where we didn't think there was going to be a camp. We said, okay, let's forget about it. And then a week later, suddenly things started to open up and then clearly everything was right together to do it. And so we've just seen God so many times as we've stepped outside of our comfort zone. That has been a real faith builder for me. And so, I think it's been as much a blessing for me as it has anybody else, to be honest, probably more so. And also, the idea of breaking through those barriers. When we first started working in that neighborhood, my son, who was in high school at the time, he said, "Dad, you go there, they're going to kill you." Like that was the reputation this neighborhood had, and I had no fear like that. But it was like this idea that, it's them and us, it's this group that you just stay away from. It's in many ways like Jesus's time, the Samaritans, the lepers, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, all that, not that the people are necessarily practicing those things, but it's analogous in the sense that the church sometimes does not have a natural connection to those neighborhoods. And so it's given us an opportunity to serve in that area. And it's always been a blessing. I've always been richer having had that, involvement.
So good. From your practice where you started with some conversations to now seeing this a full-blown outreach to community gardens, like what an incredible journey. And what I hear in it, these things are doable and can be replicated anywhere if we just listen and follow the leading of the Lord and make ourselves available. So what would you say to the guy who's listening today about the importance of being involved in their local church or being involved in their community?
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, don't ever try to do it alone. I think, we're sheep, let's face it, and Satan's a wolf. And we need the protection of the flock. We need to come alongside of each other, encourage one another, be accountable to each other. Things like pornography, which are decimating men, personally and spiritually, with shame and guilt and all those things. We can get victory. There's been many, many examples of victory over those things, but it's very hard to do those things alone. You need to have the support of your brothers in Christ. And so I would say find a group, even if you initially only have one, meet together, pray for each other, tell each other what God has done for you, tell each other the gospel, be thankful for what God has done in giving us faith in Christ's death for us so that we can have eternal life. And so build each other up but do it in community. For me, it was so critical having those guys to pray together with, to walk together. I would have found that very hard to do that alone, to be honest, but a group of 3 or 4 of us, we were able to do it. And I'd say, don't underestimate what God can do. When you say, oh, that's not possible. Well, that's true. I would say that for myself, that this was not possible to do in myself. I'm just an average guy, really. I mean, and I don't see that I have any special ability to do these things, but it was really God who did them, and I watched them. I just watched him do them before us. It's like, the walls of Jericho, you're not going to knock down those walls on your own, but if they fall down, you can walk through them. Right.
So good.
So, I would say, and also, your relationship with God, nurture that, spend time daily with God, fall in love with his word, read the whole word, not just picking and choosing, cherry picking, because sometimes you'll be amazed learning from scripture passages that you may not have thought about reading before. Work your way through the scriptures, pray together, and pray, in your time with the Lord each and every day. If you can manage that, that's a huge thing for growth.
So good. Focus on your own spiritual development and also do life together in community. And one of the ways you've done that, you've told me about your connection to some of the Promise Keepers events in the past, and so it's kind of another extension of how you've done that in community with other brothers. And what has the ministry of Impactus Promise Keepers Canada meant to you personally?
Yeah. So I think in several ways. One, the magazine has had some great articles and things to think about, and things that are relevant for men, and that's always been a really positive thing. The other is, the conferences, the national conferences. We decided early on as our men's group, we were going to make that a group event. So we would, rent the hotels. We get 3 or 4 or 5 hotels, whatever we needed, and we would go together as a group, and we would, just talk about what we're learning at the conference, and the worship with all those men together, and just the teaching, have been just wonderful, and so we made that kind of a stake in the ground that we were going to go every year. And it's been a great time too, just to step away from the hustle and bustle of life, and just have that time together, in hotel, in our hotel time, breakfasts and whatever. And so it was extra time together, just to share together. And I was able, a few times to take my sons. I think all of them at one point or other came, as well as some young guys that I was discipling who came as well. And it was just, again, a very good growth point for them, to see all these men worshiping together, especially when they're not used to churches.
So good. Yeah. So. Oh, that's great. And even just beyond just attending or reading, it's the intentionality that I love what you've shared, taking those opportunities and maximizing them to grow and to discuss and learn together. And whether that's an online virtual conference or an in-person conference, if you're intentional, you take those times, God can really teach you and grow community. And you're a living testament to what God can do when that starts to form. And he can actually use that to not only bless you, but to be a blessing wherever you are. And in your case, you're transforming a community with Northumberland Promise. Like what an incredible journey. Where can people find out a little more about your work there? And if they're inspired by this, they want to start something like it, where would they find out?
Yeah, so for sure you can get in touch with me. So we do have a website, Northumberland Promise, all one word.com. And I'll be honest with you, our website's a work in progress. One of the areas, and if anyone hearing this has an idea of some really strong sort of media support and website support, that kind of thing, I would love to hear about it, because I tend to be a doer, but all the stuff around it I'm not that great with. And but anyway, but there is some basic information, how to donate, things like that. We are a registered charity with the CRA. That was another miracle. We got a lawyer to donate $1,000 worth of service to get us registered as a charity. But anyway, I'm not plugging this as a charity. We're doing very well. We, even without fundraising, the Lord has always provided for whatever it is we've needed. But yeah, we do have a website there. There's a little bit about who we are, our statement of faith, things like that. So that's easiest. And there's also my contact information. If anyone would like to chat with me, I would be more than happy to do that.
So good. What an inspiring faith journey that has led into a ministry journey and a transformational journey as you continue to impact so many people. Dr. Bayer, thank you for taking time with us today. And I know it's your heart's desire as well. We hope that what we've shared today will inspire people and guys to think about where can we make a difference, and to start with their own personal walk with Christ, and do it in community, and then look to the community and see where you can dive in and see what doors God will open. And I suspect as we look around, there are many opportunities, and God is just waiting for us to step into those. And so thank you for modeling that for us and sharing about it today. It's been a delight to have you on the podcast.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Dean.
Thanks for listening to the Impactus podcast. To learn more about living a life of purpose and godly impact, check out impactus.org.